Welcome to Productions MJC.
This is the first talk I've had live with a flat earther, and there were a lot of technical issues, so I am sorry. Also, as you watch this, keep in mind, this is not Nathan Thompson. This is going to be a conversation, and some of it will be quite amicable and decent.
So how do you think tides actually happen? You know, I mean, I know we're all been through this, but with new eyes, you know, I'm sorry, man, but can you believe this? That's like the odds. Anyway, I guess it comes down to gravity, right?
Well, yeah, and there are explanations. Like I talked to a guy. He goes by several things. He's got 3 different names he's gotten kicked off of Facebook by. But he says it's diamagnetism that's doing it, and that was his explanation. And without actually worrying about the explanation of it, let's just think about what happens in a tide, like the Bay of Fundy. What happens in that the difference between low tide and high tide is 53 feet between those levels. So if water seeks a level, as they say, why can't this water find a level? Why is the level always changing twice a day? Why is it different? And the most important thing is, if you set a flat piece of let's say you fill a cookie sheet full of water and set it on a table, how do you get low tide on one side and high tide on the other without tilting that pan? In what way could you ever make that happen? Well, if the Earth was perfectly flat, if the Earth has no variations in its base, there's no mechanism to make a tide happen. There's no movement that would make water slosh around, because tides are known to move against the wind. They are known to happen without a wind, and they're predictable. They're predictable according to the globe method. But there are people that predict tides and such all the time, National Weather Service and stuff like that. But if you're not going to trust in that, even old timers know when high tide and low tide is and when they go and fish. But in order for the water to lower in one point, what would even be possible on a flat Earth to make it raise in another if it always stays level? There's nowhere for the water to go. There's nowhere for the water to go to. There's nowhere at low tide. There's nowhere for it to come back at high tide. And there's no mechanism to make it do that. So,
there's no mechanism that you are aware of. I mean, so in your argument, you feel that as the Earth is spinning, the tides are caused by the motion of the Earth, not by any gravitational pull from the moon or sun?
Well, no, the gravitational differences, depending on where the moon is around, whether there's a neap tide or such, can be predicted with using the global mechanism that the Earth is turning through the bulge created by that. So it's a combo of the two. Now, let's just say you say, okay, well, that's not possible. Then what is possible? Because it's predictable with that method and with that model. It's actually shown that it can occur that way. It's not 100% completely impossible. Some people think it's improbable, unbelievable, and okay, but it's not impossible. It's not so. But on a flat Earth, how would water congregate at one point so that it can be lower at another point, or vice versa? What makes it congregate in one location and not be level? Because the whole argument with the flat Earth ideal is water is always level. Well, if it's always level, then it should be always a certain level, and it shouldn't be predictable twice a day if it was like earthquakes, tsunamis, underwater volcanoes, stuff like that.
Well, there are those things, but they're not predictable.
Yeah.
What is predictable is the path of the sun and the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And did you understand what your friend meant by diametric? I'm just wondering.
Diamagnetism? Oh, yeah. Yeah. The problem with diamagnetism is that it's weaker than regular magnetism. So as the moon and sun passed by every day, then a compass wouldn't work. If the diamagnetism, which is weaker than magnetism, was strong enough to affect the oceans in the way that he described, you wouldn't be safe in a locomotive made of iron because it would be sucked into the sky. I mean, diamagnetism is magnitudes weaker than magnetism. So if you have a force strong enough to push water around, it is going to cause such a horrendous chaos in the entire system with any ferrous metal planes would just lift up and start flying towards or be repelled by this diamagnetism. So diamagnetism, see, what they're doing is they're saying, well, gravity can't exist because that's fanciful, that is imaginary. And then they come up with something that is even more fanciful and imaginary, and which is technically, literally impossible, because if the diamagnetism was strong enough to move the water around, nothing ferrous would be, the only safe place would be underground.
Well, let me put the flat Earth, let's call it gravity. I call gravity theory in perspective. It's not gravity. We don't call it gravity because gravity, to somebody who's really studied, doesn't exist. What we call it is incoherent static acceleration. And you're an intelligent guy, so I know that you're familiar with the voltage per meter squared as you go up in altitude to the stratosphere and above. So what happens is you have an incredible amount of positive energy within our atmosphere all the way to the top, where we're as high as we can go. And what happens is the Earth that we walk on, that we know, the ground, is literally a negative. And the funny thing is that a lot of people get caught up, well, what about things that aren't metal? What about that? What about something? Well, it's not actually magnetism. It's a force that creates a positive charge within anything that leads to ground. And we already have charges in this. Everything is charged. Everything has a positive and negative charge. If what we've been taught in physics is correct, that every single atom from hydrogen to uranium to einsteinium has an incredible amount of energy in it. And this energy has positive and negative except for hydrogen, unless you're using a hydrogen, an isotope. Would that be deuterium or deuterium something else, right? Deuterium is hydrogen with a
tritium.
It's like an isotope.
Yeah.
So what happens is you have everything that we've been taught that makes up everything has a charge. So what we learn in flat Earth is that it's constantly a pull down to Earth. Now, there's a lot of variables, like what causes volcanoes, what about pressure, and the funny thing is that you and I, no matter what explanation we come up with, it's the same thing. So to try and understand exactly what it is, like, for instance, the tides that you were talking about, what could possibly cause tides on a flat Earth? Now, before I even explain to you what causes tides on a flat Earth, when you talk about gravity and the moon causing tides, which would be kind of weird because we get 2 tides a day, but the moon only passes by once, and that's every 25 hours. So the sun is actually moving, or at least quicker, and that's why the moon and the sun we have phases. So the question would be, if the moon has enough gravity, enough pull, to cause tides, so what you're saying is that when the moon is over the ocean, that water technically is a little lighter. Therefore, it's expanding like a high-pressure system in weather and moving outwards. And when the moon isn't there, I just want to get this straight, if that's what you're saying. If the gravity is absent, we're just saying that gravity is a little bit, the water is a little heavier because it's not being pulled towards the moon, and therefore that's like a low pressure system. It's more dense there. Am I getting that right?
Well, it's not less dense, but and it's an elliptical bulge. It's not. The reason is as the Earth turns into the gradually increasing higher bulge, and remind you, the bulge is we have to overemphasize it and exaggerate it in drawings because it is very, very small, but and that's the whole pear-shaped Earth thing is it's it's silly. So, but what it is, this elliptical bulge, as the Earth turns into it, it is lower at that corner, so to speak. Then as it goes through the middle, there's where you get your high tide. Then as it turns again, it goes to low tide again. So there's an elliptical bulge, just a little bit of a lift. But, and 6.5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I started looking into flat Earth, wondering what everybody was talking about, ended up a year and a half later buying my own camera, going to a lake that was, I had a Minolta X700, an old analog baby, and I've had that for 35 years, so I'm like, it's about time to pull the trigger and buy a digital so that I can record it and look at it and stuff.
Okay.
So I bought a camera and I went to a lake that's nearly 18 miles long and nearly 7 miles wide, and I recreated some videos that Taboo Conspiracy had taken, and I couldn't recreate what he was doing unless I fudged. So let me.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
The funny thing about those videos is that one of the things that we learned, real flat earthers learn right from the beginning, that when you see the sun going over the horizon, when you see a boat disappearing over the supposed curve, humidity and atmospheric lensing has a tremendous amount to do with what we actually see in the physical realm. And the strange thing about that is that I have seen, and with my own eyes, the angular dimension of the sun actually diminishing during, we'll call it sunset for lack of a better phrase, depending upon the level of humidity in the air. And of course today it's very difficult with the weather manipulation that they're doing, which I know that they're doing for a fact, because I did military design for submersibles and liquid dynamics and mechanics. But getting back on track here, the humidity and the lensing factor of our atmosphere really eludes most globe believers that I've ever met. Like when I talk about things like the arc of horizon, which is basically field of view, people don't understand what I'm saying. So if you picture so you study flat Earth, which is good. So if you picture the flat Earth model with a little dome over it, and I know it's a little bit of a ridiculous vision, but just picture that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see the map down there, you find the United States where we are. Now picture a little dome over you. There you are, Marcus, you're standing on a big field, okay? And there is a dome over you. How big is the dome? Depends on your field of view. So people say, well, I'm in Japan, the moon is upside down. I'm over here, I don't understand that. Because your field of view and your perceptual angle is everything. People don't understand how that works. They're like, I don't understand. If we're all on a flat plane, it doesn't work like that. The atmospheric phenomenon of lensing, and especially when there's humidity in the air, is unreal. I mean, I used to see these videos when I first started Flat Earth. Well, actually, I started before I had access to the internet, but because I was away somewhere. And I remember when I finally got, like 2.5 years ago, when I finally got this computer and I really started getting into the internet and really looking for this stuff, what I found through my own experimentation with high-quality drones and then the very expensive long-range ones, is that the effect that humidity has on an object that's traveling away from you is everything when it comes to what appears to be disappearing over the curve. Now, I have videos right now at my disposal which shows almost 1,000 miles. Now, the guy was at 6,900 feet. He was on top of a mountain that was about 7,000 feet. He was at 6,900 feet, and he had an infrared, and he had his Nikon P1000, and he zoomed into an area, and what he did was he showed what he was looking at side by side on Google Maps, so that we could get a perspective as to what we're actually looking at. And it was an absolute authentic video. As a matter of fact, it's way down at the bottom of our group. When I grabbed it, and I'm going to put it back at the top. So when I see videos where people are saying 200, 300, 500 miles, it's for somebody to turn around and say, well, wait a minute, that's an illusion. It's a reflection off the sky. It's a reflection off the water. This wasn't over water. It was over a desert. But he looked so far. This guy saw Mexico from like middle California. And he literally proved it through his very careful, high-resolution photos, putting them side by side with Google Maps. When I see that, I can't personally, because when I grew up, I loved the idea of a globe. I really liked the idea of space. I had a lot of dreams of one day maybe going into space. So my bubble was burst when I found out that we're now on a globe. And I have a very high altitude and a very high IQ. I have an extremely technical background. So I wasn't going to buy it that easy. I really needed to do a lot of research. And the first thing that hit me was these long-range photos and films. And I'm just wondering, like, when you see a film like that, how is that possible on a globe? Or just, like, what? Because you're a smart guy, and I'm listening to you, so how is that possible on a globe? I didn't get back to the tides.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, we can touch on everything. That'd be great, because we have limited time, so no problem. No, you're right, and so did I. And for me, it was the opposite, and I'll explain that, and then I'll go into the thing, okay? And I appreciate your time.
No problem.
Going back to that 18-mile-long lake, there are hills to the south of that lake, but the lake to the north actually has a dike that separates it from a swampy area. It's about 3 hours away from me, and it's designed specifically to be irrigation storage. It was a natural lake, but they kind of breached it, and so during certain times they pump water into it, and then during the irrigation, the summer and such, they pull water out of it. And on that northern shore, it's called Bear Lake. It's separated by Utah. It's Utah-Idaho line is about right in the middle, I think, or somewhere near there. But on the northern side, there is a building that is 35 feet high. There are some telephone poles that are roughly about 40 feet high, and some trees, some poplars and stuff that go 50 feet high. And from 16 miles, if I was 10 feet off the water, I couldn't see the building, not even the top. If I got to 40 feet high, I could see the top of the building. And if I got 60 feet high, which there's a road that kind of rolls around and it does gain in altitude around a corner, I could see most of the building. And the taboo conspiracy, the flat earth guy, he would film only from the north side. And he would say, I see too far to the south. Well, I challenged him. I said, well, I've looked this way from the south. For 3.5 years, I said, let's even meet. Let's go over and let's film from the south side. He wouldn't do it. And geez, I'm a tiny guy. I'm not a physical guy. He could have brought an army with him. I don't care. I said, let's meet and you show me what you're doing. And he wouldn't do it because on my videos, he called me out. He said, you've got a heat shimmer in there, as he called it, And he says, your calculations are wrong. So I'm like, okay. I went out and redid the video according to what he said to do, but I found out that I could only recreate his shots if I said the camera was 2.5 feet off the ground, but the camera was actually 6.5, 5.5, 6.5 feet off the ground. I had to do a video trick because I have seen that there's a cemetery to the south of this lake, and from the cemetery I can actually see the entire building, the whole lake, and everything else. And then going back to some words that you used, angular lensing. There's angular resolution, there's atmospheric lensing, there's other things. I have found, in my experience, that angular resolution means absolutely nothing like the flat Earth definition says, because I've actually looked up the real definition of angular resolution.
Well, we could come up with another phrase.
Yeah, angular resolution is simply the ability of the device you're using, whether it be a camera, telescope, your eyeball, whatever, to differentiate between two separate. Oh, Jackie says she got kicked out. To differentiate, yeah, it says she got kicked out.
Kicked out?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe it.
I never used the phrase angular resolution.
No, I understand. You used atmospheric lensing, and atmospheric lensing does occur, but with angular resolution, I've seen some video makers do that, where they make up their own definition. It's like, well, you haven't got the right angle on it, that's why the boat disappears. Well, from the bottom up. But mind you, mind you, when I started looking into this 6 years ago, Geronism, p-brane, DITRH, Globebusters, and everybody, they flat out denied boats disappeared from the bottom up. And I wish I would have downloaded those videos, because now they've deleted them. Right. That's the whole idea. And they say it's from angular resolution is their claim. But angular resolution. Yeah. Try that one out, because you'll see some of those folks use it, and it simply means they told me the reason the building disappears is because of angular resolution. The angle from where I'm at to the building isn't right, and but yeah, it
creates like a lens.
Right.
Those things.
Frenzel lens. Yes.
Like the size of a sheet of paper on their lens.
Yeah, it's a Frenzel lens, and there's no way
what do
that.
you call them? What do you call those things?
Frenzel lens or Fresnel lens or something.
Yeah, Fresnel lens. Okay, so
yeah.
You have one of those lenses, and
yeah.
A lot of people have done it. It's the same crap. We put it at the end of the table or right near you, and move like a candle away from it. And the strange thing is that it is a really good experiment, because I have seen videos from people that I trust on different dates across like Lake Erie. Now that's far,
yeah.
And the Great Lakes and stuff. And I've seen them where sometimes, as the boat's going away on a humid day, it disappears just like there's a curve. And then on dry days, you can see the boat to the shore. So I think what that proves to me is that, your eyes are absolutely seeing something disappear from the bottom up. Absolutely. But it's not the curve of the Earth. Because if it was the curve of the Earth, why can't I see the curve at 200,000 feet? According to Google, at 35 to maybe 50,000 feet, any human that sees through their eyeballs should be able to see a curve. You look at it, you see the curve of the Earth. And I got absolutely authentic videos from 150,000 plus feet. No curve, no distortion, no curvature lenses, no fisheye lenses. There is no curve. Now, occasionally, I'll see a video where it looks like there's this slight curve on the edge. It's hard to tell, but it does look like there's a slight curve. It's not the Earth.
Yeah.
It's the atmospheric elements like argon, neon. There's a lot of them. There's a few that create an absolute bend. I don't know if you've ever seen some of these videos dealing with neon. And hold on a second, please. Hang on, Lucas. I have a little list I want to just give it to you. But there's some noble gases, pretty much.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the atmosphere through that angle and the sun is on the horizon, you're looking at a real long distance of atmosphere. The longest, the most atmosphere we could ever look through is when the sun's rising, or I say rising, it doesn't matter, but when the sun's setting.
Right.
So that's the longest we could ever look through an atmosphere. And that incredible effect that the noble black, like when you see orange in the sky, that's not spectrum filtering. That's noble gases. I mean, that's exactly what it is, because if you ever look at noble gases, when you put any kind of electricity or any kind of energy near noble gases, each noble gas has a specific color.
True.
And
But,
right. So you realize that when I see these absolute, like, okay, I have all of these SpaceX, Elon Musk, SpaceX, they take off, they go up 75, 80 miles, they can't go any higher, they never do. And occasionally, you'll see a glimpse of the Earth from the inside camera. Not the outside camera, because that's a curvature lens, but the inside camera. And I catch it every time. Every time. I think Elon's doing this purposely, because he's kind of like one of those guys. And you look at it, and you're at 70 plus miles high. Absolutely flat as a level. So why would I see a curve up there?
well, no, that's a good question, and there's several things that you brought up. And a Fresnel lens, whatever they are, they bend light quite a bit. But right, more than, and so it's a false experiment. Well, and have you seen people slide a coin across the tabletop and it disappears from the bottom up?
Yeah, but not only that, what happens is there's an angular effect. It's like almost a prism effect, but not quite. So when you're going through a lens, or it's like, even if you take a glass of water and put something right behind it and just start moving it, you'll notice that the image starts breaking down.
Well,
so not only does it disappear at the bottom, the top starts angulating, and it starts like angular-wise, it starts going down. And so it's kind of weird, because from what I can tell,
well, I'm here to say that an 8-year-old could pull that trick with the coin sliding across the table and make it look like it disappeared from the bottom up.
No, it's only because it's not a trick. What it is it's a demonstration of what humidity in the atmosphere could possibly cause.
Now,
something as it goes further away from you, because the either convex or
I've actually
effect has, because the humidity in the atmosphere is an incredible thing. Some of the phenomenon it causes is really mind-boggling.
that is
One of that phenomenon is the sun appears to go over the curve of the Earth. I have videos I took with my drone with the sun on dry days, and I'll show you one. I'll send it to you.
well. I understand that video trick too, and I'll explain them both.
There's one trick.
Oh, there is. It's very simple to do. The coin sliding across the table, disappearing from the bottom up, is an incredibly easy trick. You simply have to put.
That's not
Yeah.
a trick. It's a demonstration.
Oh no, it's not. They say no, not a magnifying glass, not a Fresnel lens, just a coin sliding across the table, disappears from the bottom up. There are several videos out there.
Okay.
It is an extremely simple way to set up. An 8-year-old could do it. All you have to do is make sure that the center of the lens of the camera is at least a half a millimeter or more below the center, below the tabletop. If you put that,
I've seen those done plenty of times where the camera literally is put right on the tabletop, where an observer standing on the air would be. Now, you might have seen videos where somebody's pulling that trick, and that's not too fair if they do that.
yeah, and now I'm gonna do that.
That's a trick. That's a trick.
Right.
I don't deal with that. David Weiss has done it. he films what he's doing from another camera. You can see where his camera is.
I would love to see that. Well, without a forensic lens, without a magnifying glass, without anything else,
Yeah.
I would love to see them slide a coin across the tabletop while keeping the camera on the table.
It has to be on the table, otherwise it's a cheap trick.
Right. And the years ago when what was it? 5 years ago when when I had to drive 5.5 hours to see the eclipse, I spent $10 and bought some Eclipse glasses. And the problem is when you film the sun's intensity through a mist, a fog, humidity, something like that, it does make it appear to travel off into the distance and get smaller. But if you stand there with a pair of Eclipse glasses on and watch it, John, understanding what you're saying, if you were to put a pair of these little $2 Eclipse glasses on and you make your video with your drone and you wear those Eclipse glasses, you will see something with your own natural eyes that is extremely different from what the camera is seeing. Because if you notice one thing, there are actually two things that these flat earth video makers will never film. They will never film a high altitude balloon video, saying hot, but anyway, a high altitude, helium balloon video. They will never film a launch at 10:30 at night on the night of the new moon. I've seen it done by people, not even globe believers, and such like that. Just people that were either trying to sell their balloons or sell their cameras or sell their launching business, their facility where they supply the balloons and you rent them and all that stuff.
You're saying they don't launch at night?
They do not launch at that late at night, because when the balloon reaches apex around 1 or 2 in the morning, between 12:30 and 1:30 in the morning, when it reaches apex and gets up there 90, 100,000 feet, and it does its 360, 540, whatever it does, there is no circling sun off in the distance, but you can still see stars. And they will never do that one, because you've seen the videos like the little piggy and stuff like that where they say, see, it's a close sun because I can see it. See how bright it is. And it's supposedly, and they filmed it like they'll launch at 8:30, they'll launch at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but no flat earth video maker has ever launched at 10:30 at night on the night of the new moon, because when that camera spins around, there's no circling sun off in the distance, but the camera can still see stars. And those stars...
That's a good point, but you did not take into consideration the atmospheric limitations of sight and light. You're not taking that into consideration. Of course you're going to see the moon. I can show you a video right now where in the middle of the day, I sent up a rocket. And, it was a day. They sent up a rocket, and I believe it was either Illinois or Utah. And the rocket goes up, it's got the cameras on it, and it gets up to about, I think it was 160,000, 170,000 feet, and lo and behold, way in the distance is this little dot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the moon. So, the guy who did the video was a pretty smart guy, and I also did my testing. I checked to see if his information was right. So I had the date, I had the time, 11:34 in the morning. So I said, well, let me see where the moon is, right? It was over Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there is absolutely impossible. So you might be saying, well, where's the sun?
Oh no, it's not impossible. If you take a beach ball and a ruler and a yardstick, if you take a beach ball and a yardstick and you balance the yardstick and you set one end as if it were the rocket, the higher the rocket goes, where the yardstick touches the beach ball will change. The horizon will move. And soon enough, if you get that rocket, simulated, lift it up. you're looking around you're looking around a
I know
corner.
what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
The problem was this. Not that the moon could be over Australia because they're so high up, you're actually seeing around the Earth, kind of. Obviously, at that height, you can see around quite a bit. But definitely one of all. But the problem was that the camera, which was a very good camera, very high resolution, picked up the actual ground. In other words, if we were on a ball, and that rocket went up, and that moon was way out there, 230,000 miles away.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
What would happen is the horizon would drop way down, and it would give the impression that the moon is obviously where it's supposed to be, way out in space, and that underneath, when you look down at 160,000, you would see that the horizon is nowhere near the moon, because being on a ball, that horizon drops away, the moon is far away, according to heliocentric.
Okay.
So you're correct, where if that was the case, you would see the moon. However, in the video, which I'm going to send you, which you probably saw, maybe you didn't, this is one of them, but this one's a really good one. You can see the Earth right under the moon, right to the horizon. And
Well,
that is impossible on a globe.
no, it's not. It's not impossible because when my favorite plane of all time, the SR-71, when it gets up to cruising altitude,
Which is,
78, 80,000 feet,
okay.
the horizon has extended from when they're in the cab, from 4 miles. When they get up there to that 80,000 feet, that has actually extended out to hundreds of miles, but the horizon is actually only 5 degrees down. The problem is people don't, the horizon is falling, but people don't perceive it because it's such a small thing until you get way out there. You had mentioned 35,000, 50,000. I found in my studies, people don't really recognize that the Earth has a curvature until objects either get away from them around 55,000 feet, about 9 miles, or when they get 9 miles up. See, an airplane's only 35. It's only 7 miles up. But when they get around 9 miles up, then they start to realize, wait a minute, that's kind of rounded. That's not really super flat. And that's really the target distance that I've seen is about 50 to 54, 55, when the human brain finally clicks in and goes, wait a minute, that really isn't round. But really isn't flat, pardon me. And they say, that's got kind of a weird shape to it. And being a photographer for 35 years, I know all about fisheye lenses. I know how right on the center line, they don't distort hardly at all. There's really no distortion. And then as you go above that center line, it bends things up. And as you go below it, it bends things down. So some people can watch the Little Piggy video or any of these others, and they will see the Earth, as that camera gyrates, go from a concave Earth to a convex Earth. And if they can get that Earth along that center line and then actually draw a straight line, they will see a curve. I've done that with several. What if you won't object to it, I know some of the followers in the group will object, but I can link to videos, and if they're inappropriate, certainly tear them down. But if they're not, then talk about it. Talk about like you and I are doing. I mean, geez, why can't people do that? But
Well, you gotta remember something too. When somebody finds something out, and hopefully not everybody looks into things. Sometimes people just paraclip about what they can tell and heard.
right.
Individuals that I associate with, really do some serious studying.
Well-
We're looking at a world where you say a boat can disappear over the curve of the Earth 9 miles out, but we can go up 100,000 feet and not see a curve. So there's so many discrepancies. When I first started looking at the flat Earth, I thought, well, if we're on a ball, it's way bigger than they're telling us.
It's really big, but remember at the first of, when you and I, before this, when you and I were talking along, and we had discussed the fact that I don't like to really get into optical illusions because it's really subjective and stuff like that. And remember when you said I'm not taking into account the limitations of visual sight when I say that when the balloon goes up on the night of the new moon and reaches apex at 1 o'clock in the morning, there will not be a circling sun visible, even though we see the sun visible extremely well in other videos. To say that, well, you're not taking into account the distance limitations of vision, that could be a factor, except the stars, which are allegedly either on the firmament or outside of the firmament, are still visible. And so the circling sun, or the circling moon, should be between the observer, the camera, in this case, and the firmament, as people say it exists. So to say that I'm not taking into account the limitations of visual eyesight. Stars are not as bright as the sun, and if I can still see the stars in the video, matter of fact, I'll even show you. I'll try to link up with you and send it to your actual account, and I will show you. It's a bunch of German folks, and they send this up, and you, as this camera does a 540, you see Orion go by, and you know it's Orion, and you can see all the other stars, the little teeny faint stars, but the one thing you do not see is a circling sun off in the distance. And I had some folks comment and say, well, you can't see that far. And I'm saying, well, the sun's supposedly supposed to be between me and those stars on the other side, and I can see the stars. So where's the sun?
Here's the answer. I know this. You're not going to see the sun because of the limitations of the atmosphere. When you watch the sun go down or go away, whatever you want to say, on the nights that there's less humidity, in my personal experience, the sun literally fades into the atmosphere and disappears as a dot. I have films with drones, not just with taking the ISO and the white,
and the white balance and stuff.
Not the white balance, like dropping them all down. So I use solar filters now.
The f-stop.
I have people say, people tell me, oh, solar filter, you're going to use a solar filter. So I know. And you can see the sun get smaller on the solar filter. It's amazing. And so what I know is that when the sun, according to the information that I got about flat Earth, some people feel the sun is between 37 and 40 miles in diameter, like the moon, and it's about 3,600 miles in height.
Right.
That the height actually changes through the seasons.
As well as the diameter. Yeah, as well as the diameter at which it circles.
Yeah, so what happens is if you look at a flat Earth model, just for a minute, and you go, okay, I want to know where the sun and the moon on this thing. Now forget about the circle you see all the time. If you look at the actual land masses like the United States, right?
Okay.
And you look at, so right now, let's say there's a plate in front of you and it's the flat Earth. Let's say it's the Gleason's model, which is not recognized. But of course, the funny thing is that that might not be realized. That might not be recognized. But what is recognized is the exact same map, which is used by the Geological Association of the United States. And so that's really funny. They use the same map. They don't use a globe. They use a flat Earth map. And if you look at that map, and you look at what 37 miles is, it's really teeny. It's like a dot. And then if you take that little dot and you raise it up, the equivalent of what would be, I guess, 3,000 miles. I think it's actually lower, but that's just me. And that dome, people picture the whole Earth with this giant dome over it. It's not a dome, first of all, okay? The firmament is literally a plasmatic liquid an element probably unknown to us that's landed in the water. But it's so easy. Have you ever seen skywalks, sky stones?
I've seen, now you're not talking about sun doggies, moon doggies, and all that, but...
No, I'm talking about the rocks that fall in the Antarctica all the time.
Okay.
And it's like, there's piles of them, they're blue. When they aspirate, they don't melt. They go directly from a solid to a gas. And what they are is pure oxygen, and they're ice. You can actually put some in a drink and it's really cold. It's really funny. And they're basically exist at a temperature of about 120 to 150 below zero. So for some reason, though, they find them existing in warmer temperatures, and they stay stable until they're like moved and touched and chipped, and they disappear. They don't melt; they just go into gas. And I've seen quite a number of videos on these incredible things. And one of the things that I noticed about this is that people that start to wake up to flat Earth have a really distorted view of what flat Earth is, because all the models I see out there are just not.
Well, that's part of the problem, though. Sam Robotham in 1838 first proposed this, and we've had 174 years for someone to come up with.
First proposed what?
Sam Robotham in 1838 came out with his book, a 16-page book, and he stated all of this, where the 3,000 miles and the 32 miles comes from. And it's been 174 years. Nobody's come up with a working model yet. I mean, an actual working model.
There was a working model by a guy named Al Baruni. Have you ever heard of him?
Well, the Baruni model still didn't. He got it to function, but only if the sun. He got seasons to work on it, but only if the sun and moon, the light and dark patch of the Earth, as the flat Earth sun supposedly floated along this linear path, if the shape of the light was in a yin-yang pattern, where the yin and yang, one was light, one was dark, and so it made this curved teardrop shape. That's the only way he could get seasons to work. And he had no explanation for how that would be possible with an alleged spotlight sun to make this curved teardrop-shaped pattern. And you can find GIFs and pattern things associated with that show that's the only way to get a season to work, because it has to have a concave leading edge, like a spotlight, but it has to have a convex leading edge, but it has to have a concave trailing edge. See, the spotlight sun doesn't work because it has a convex leading and a convex following edge. That's what a spotlight is. It's round. But with his model, he was able to show if the sun pattern was concave at the front and convex at the back, then not the time zones, but the actual solar observances would match. You know, like solar noon, solar...
I know what he's saying,
but it's dead wrong.
Taking into consideration other aspects of our atmosphere. I mean, he was a brilliant Persian, incredible man. I mean, from I read his history. And right now, the Gleason's map, which is an exact duplicate of the Geological Association. Now, the Geological Association in this country uses Al-Baruni's map. So that goes back 1,000 years, the flat Earth map. So the United States Geological Society, in their atlas, uses to this day a flat Earth map that was basically put together by Al-Baruni 1,000 years ago. And have you ever studied an all cuneiform text? You know who Zachariah Sitchin is?
I've heard of Sitchin, but...
He was a guy who figured out how to, hopefully, correctly translate the cuneiform text. There were other scholars that came after him that might even be better than him, but he was the first. And they talked about the flat round cuneiform text as 8,000 to 12,000 years ago. So, I mean, And someone might say, well, they didn't, back then they didn't have the technology. And then you would be partly correct and partly wrong. So if you look around today, there's a lot of different signs that people don't take. Like when people are talking about globe versus flat Earth, nobody talks about monolithic structures. I don't hear people talking about the kind of technology they had during the golden era that we don't even have today. Laser cutting rocks with some kind of laser technology. I mean, they prove it. They have no answer as to how this technology existed back then. And then
Right.
we have, from a similar era, cuneiform text, Messier script, ancient Greek and Aramaic, talking about flat realms, some kind of covering enclosed system. Like you were talking about, like one of the main things. I don't want to jump around here, but you're good with this stuff. You're good. First to think, but you're great. Me too, right? The atmosphere. People say, well, wait a minute, the Earth's spinning at 1,028 miles an hour, according to science. How does that happen? Now, people will say, well, you don't feel the air, you don't feel nothing when you're on a train. Well, a train is an enclosed system, right? We're an enclosed system. But how do you explain the atmosphere moving with the Earth?
Sure.
If gravity is only a force that pulls down, it doesn't pull horizontally. It only pulls vertically. So what you're saying is that it's pulling the atmosphere down because obviously oxygen, argon, neon, nitrogen, helium, these all have mass. So it's pulling down to the Earth, and of course, because there's so much of it, we live on near what, 14 psi, right?
14.7 at sea level. Yeah, that's another thing that we could talk about quickly.
The atmosphere is 14.7.
Uh-huh.
So now the Earth is moving, the atmosphere is moving with it. You
Right.
do realize how absurd that is, right? So
Oh,
the
no,
atmosphere
not at all.
100,000 feet, the atmosphere at 100,000 feet has to move so much faster than the atmosphere down at the bottom.
But it doesn't.
Absolutely no.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No. What do you think a jet stream is? The problem is you're arguing from incredulity. You're saying that I don't understand how that works, how that could work, so that can't possibly work. But Tesla proved it can. It's called the Tesla turbine. The Tesla turbine is so efficient, they really have a problem trying to figure out how to use it. See, a Pelton wheel, for instance, you can generate energy from a Pelton wheel. Do you know how they work? They have a cup, a special shaped cup, so it strikes. Basically, it imparts energy to that cup all the way through its motion because of the way it's shaped. And it's used in electric generators all the time. And the Pelton wheel can be, the speed is like between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM. Now, with a Tesla turbine, it consists of multiple flat discs like CDs stuck together. And the water enters in at the outside edge and progresses around in a circular motion through what's called the boundary layer effect, and it comes out the center because there's no connecting rods, there's no cups. The discs are there without any spacers between them. There's nothing to catch the water. The only thing that moves this wheel is it snagging along the smooth surface of these discs. They're not roughened. They are smooth. But as this water swirls around in a circle and then goes out the center, it is so stinking efficient that they can get these things 40, 50, I think the record is 72,000 RPM. This thing is so efficient. And the water, as it's rotating around, sticks to the surface of the... How can water simply running from one place to another cause a wheel to rotate at 70,000 RPM? But if you were on the surface of that one of those discs, looking at that water molecule, it may It may be a simulated 5-mile-an-hour wind, but you're whipping around on it.
Force would like kill you. I mean, you know, I mean.
Well, but if you could get a camera to look at that, it's not moving past it very fast at all. Boundary layer effect was actually proven. Was it Benz? Can't remember. Anyway, the Tesla put the boundary layer effect to practical use and created a turbine so efficient nobody knows what to do with it. It spins at 60,000 RPM. It's crazy.
Yeah, but you know, you're talking about a small, you know, I mean.
Well, it's a right. It's a yeah.
It's still very small compared to your heliocentric Earth.
Right. It's a scale model.
And the force that's holding that water is probably like 1,000 times what you would consider gravity to be.
Right. It's a scale model of scale models are great. Like when people put water on a tennis ball and spin it and the water flies off, and they go, well, look at that, you can't do it. It's not even near scale because the water droplets are not even near what water droplets are on the shape of the Earth. So you have to do something to scale. And I would love to put a up on the website, up in the group. I would love to put a scale model experiment and see if anybody wants to take that up. And it.
You know, with the group, it's just when I started the group, I was trying to create a safe area for people that feel that they're interested in flat Earth and model Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I have all the flat Earth groups I've ever been to are horrible.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. And I've seen both sides. I've been kicked out of 8 or 9 because, yeah, you know, we've had that happen. But when it's just a simple scale experiment, simulating sunrise and sunset, and you know, everybody can tell me what they think of it. It doesn't hurt my feelings if they tell me I'm full of crap because they certainly wouldn't be the first. And they won't be the last. You know, there'll be somebody that'll walk up and spit on my casket and tell me I'm a son of a. You know, what I'm saying. You know, it'll happen.
I guess you never really. So I have to look into that.
Yeah.
I can't really comment on
Sure.
it.
No. I
But, you know,
understand.
We went through all of the Michelson, Henry Gumbel, the Nicholson, the Nicholson Gale, and so you know.
Well, the Michelson-Morley experiment, the failure to get to prove aether exists. You know, and don't get me wrong. The evolution is garbage. It's fake, you know, news. We could go on about that forever because it's a thought experiment, and it's just all of their papers are conjecture and guess and garbage. The young Earth creationists, though, in my opinion, are off the mark as well. But what a plane, I do know just, well, I had a father-in-law that flew planes, but I don't fly. But the thing that I wanted to point out, another I missed, and I apologize, I'm going back, but the other thing you will never see videoed from a flat Earth video maker is the moon disappearing into a little dot like the sun does. It is easy for it to be done with the sun because it's a video trick. The brightness and intensity overloads the camera. It's CCD or CMOS. Well, that way, if it's a true solar filter, but it's not right. But a true solar filter is far different than a regular darkened filter. There's a difference because the darkened filters are tinted in a certain way. I would recommend to everybody to get go in as a group and buy 10 Eclipse glasses for $20, $25, whatever it'll cost, and go have a sunrise party and watch the sun come up over the horizon. You know, make an event of it. You know.
Well, you see, the problem is that, especially today, we have a problem with our weather. Where are you located now, sorry?
Well, I'm on the 41st parallel, located near. I'm kind of obscured by the Rocky Mountains, so I can't. You know.
Obviously, you've been stick of the rain in the clouds.
Yeah, and so that happens,
I don't want to get into it, but they're under the guise of climate change and global warming. They're dropping tremendous amount, tons and tons and tons of powdered carbon dioxide, which is nothing more than dry ice. And they're also dropping sulfur. They're trying to create, artificial low pressure systems, and they're really ruining it for I want to take all of these videos. I've been waiting for the summer because I stand out there in August and the sun is directly above my head. I could use a second. I could use any kind of instrumentation I want. It's right above my head. That's not possible on a globe. Not according to the heliocentric theory and the angle that I am in at my, latitude 9-1. It's just not possible. And one of the things that I do, and I'm going to also take you up on that moon thing. I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have to take into consideration is what started me into this conversation was the humidity in the atmosphere recently has been off the charts.
Right.
I can't see one day without clouds, and it really is pissing me off. So I'm trying to, because what we're doing is just, it's so unfortunate that we're living in these draconian times, but we're going to get Turbine.
There's
which has nothing to do with our conversation. Right.
But, there's three things that you can do. There's three things that you can do to kind of, when I come at it on an experiment I did with somebody, and we just said, okay, let's assume the Earth is completely perfectly flat, and then let's try looking at Polaris and see if that matches. Well, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the flat Earth illustration shows that Polaris should be up at about a 60-degree angle above the horizon. When I mentioned this, one of the folks in the group was, no, you can't use instruments. You have to just use your eyes. And, because the instruments don't lie. People can lie after they get done using them, but the instruments don't lie. And, yeah, and an astrolabe has been around forever. It's the sextant was only invented a little while ago, but the astrolabe has been around for a long time. You can just use a simple astrolabe to see that the viewing angle from Belize near the equator should roughly be about 47 degrees because it's near the equator. It's about in the middle. And the viewing angle of Polaris, and from Santa Cruz, it should roughly be about 30 degrees. But when you do an actual experiment, you will find that, no, the viewing angle is actually 45 degrees from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's only 17 degrees, not 47, from Belize, and it is completely 100% impossible to see from Santa Cruz. Now, you may say, well, that's the distance limitation of viewing for Santa Cruz, Argentina. But
it's called the horizon or field of view.
Well, the field of view, once your field of view narrows down to a certain spot, like when you're looking through a telephoto lens, you can't see far side to side. But the problem is there cannot be a 30-degree discrepancy. Now, the problem is it matches the globe prediction exactly. Exactly. Globe calculations, as they say. So there's a problem with that one. But the funnest thing I have ever done was back in 1984, I went to a field day of the Amateur Radio Relay League, and I had already been a ham radio operator for 6 years, goofed around with 2-meter band, 440 centimeter, 70 centimeter, 440 megahertz frequencies. And at this field day, I jokingly like to say that ham radio operators, these ARRL folks, they're kind of like NASCAR fans, except it's radios instead of cars. They get kind of goofy, but they're not scientists, but holy crap do they get into it. I know a guy in Kansas that bought a World War II gun turret so that he could attach his 10-meter parabolic dish to it so he could bounce signals off the moon. And at this field day in 1984, we were given stopwatches so we could see the guy key the the sequence, he had a little sighting scope that looked to me like a Weaver or a Bushnell mounted to his antenna, and he would put the moon in the crosshairs, and then he would key the mic and then let go, and we were to hit, there are 4 or 5 of us around, we would hit these stopwatches, and all of us are coming up with 2.5 seconds when we hear the signal come back from the bounce, okay? And it's the same technology that gets you in trouble if you're speeding, or the same technology that you can go down to Home Depot and buy a $24 lane rangefinder, an electric measuring tape. You don't have a strip, you just sit it down, turn it on, and it tells you how far that the device is away from the wall, and you can electronically measure distances just with the light pulse or radio pulse coming out of it. So in doing the math, 2.5 second distance, it has to travel off of the Earth, hit the moon, and come back, and it takes 2.5 seconds. That roughly translates to 238,000 miles. And my knowledge of ham radio at the frequency that was being used, which was in the 440 range, it isn't affected by atmosphere. It isn't affected by energy. The moon cannot be a plasma ball out there for everybody to see. It has to be a solid object. That radio frequency has to be. Right. Right.
I mean, if it was a projection, it's an awful good one. I mean,
well,
speculation about the moon. And
radio frequency won't bounce off the moon. Yeah.
I definitely know that there's a lot of mystery to it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you one thing, though. I mean, that's a pretty good, result that you got. And I understand what you're saying in terms of your ham radio frequency. Of course, you know that all frequencies are on the spectrum of light, and there's a tremendous amount of frequencies within the atmosphere. As far as any kind of resistance that would cause that signal to take 2.5 seconds is like just something that I would have to look into, because there's so many things that point to flat Earth with organizations and things that shouldn't have anything to do with flat Earth. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, getting away from just that for one moment. I mean, everybody. Like the aeronautical pilot's handbook never mentions curvature. Everything is a flat non-rotating Earth. When you look at all kinds of, we know that the Copernican theory was completely wrong. The Earth is constant. People talk about Einstein and the theory of relativity and the general and the special theory of relativity, which was ridiculously wrong because there was no constant. You can't talk to me about observers and the theory of relativity if there is no constant, if there's nothing that's actually still. You just can't prove anything. And I mean, I looked into all of these things and I thought, well, okay, let's just say it was all a thought experiment. What if something was still? What if the Earth wasn't moving? All right, I get it. But there's too many variables, like you can see so far. When you understand that the moon is over somewhere that we shouldn't be seeing, the idea of the incredible phenomena within our atmosphere, like planes. We talk about planefinder.net. We talk about GPS signals and planes that don't have it. We don't care about those.
Right, but
GPS, and they transmit their signal to something hopefully on the ground, whatever it is.
Well, and there was that article, that was that post on there that said, hey, the plane just disappeared. It was a video, said the plane just disappeared.
I have a couple of different people that did the same thing.
Yeah.
I have another video that if you want to watch it. And all the guy does is he records his screen, he goes onto one of these plane finder websites,
right.
He tries to follow something,
Mm-hmm.
anything off the coast of South America,
Right.
And everything that comes off the coast disappears.
Yes, it does.
You had said that it was because
it's radar.
they lost contact.
No, it's radar. It isn't GPS. That's the thing is, the GPS signal, the pings that are sent back to the sat track and stuff like that, the reason it's doing that, they do estimates sometimes, but when they go out over the open ocean, then they're out of radar range. It's the same people. Some people say that GPS is from the old Loran-C system that that was decommissioned back in 2010, but they're saying GPS is from the Loran-Cs. Well, and the problem with that being is that if you take a satellite phone or a GPS unit into an above ground parking structure that's open air, you can talk on your phone, you can text, the radio in the car will work, but the GPS unit won't and the sat phone won't work until you go out in the open air and can see the sky again. And you can have towers all around you. And the problem with these plane finders, and because if you look at them, they say radar 24 or something like that. It's not GPS. It's a misperception that they're actually tracking the GPS signal in the of the plane. That's why they disappear.
No. They're not tracking the plane. They're receiving data broadcast directly from the aircraft. And the primary technology used in that is ADS-B and LAT, which also includes data feeds from FAA and glider feed flying. So I know about this shit, and they don't read the GPS in
right. And so when it drops off, on these websites that he's looking at, when it drops off because there's no more radar. And they really don't broadcast the exact perfect location of airplanes for certain reasons.
Well, I understand that,
safety reasons and stuff.
Tracking live, though. I mean, there's a lot of dedicated networks like the ADS-B receivers on the ground and stuff like that. And, you got to remember something. That those things can go about 1,000+ miles with no problem. It's like the military railguns. They have a railgun that can shoot you at 200 miles. You got to remember what they're shooting out.
That's what they say. But and that would work on a curved Earth, and it would not. Oh yeah, because as you shoot it, it forms an arch. All bullets form an arch.
I understand that.
Right.
I worked with a lot of individuals when it comes to certain trajectories, and like certain weapons have to shoot straight. Of course, there's always going to be an arc. You're right. There's always going to be a deterioration of the where it's traveling. There's going to be deterioration.
Mm-hmm.
It's being pulled down.
Yeah.
Because of what you call gravity and what I call incoherent static acceleration. But there's no way. A railgun is basically made to shoot straight at such a speed that the arc is minimal. So for them to say, well, we're going to shoot this thing out at 7,000 miles an hour or more, and we're going to plan on its arc to hit something around the corner of the Earth 200 miles away. It doesn't work like that. What they're shooting, they can see. I know this for a fact. Okay, I know it. I was never active military on one of those boats, but I worked with SEALs a lot. I knew SEAls that were stationed in Antarctica. We tested one atmospheric anti-submersibles off of Port Williams. I was there. That big, by the way, that's literally a couple of 100 miles from the Antarctica, and the sun went up and the sun went down. It was never a midnight sun. It was never any of that. People talk about midnight suns in Antarctica. I've never seen it. I've seen videos that were taken in the north, in the Arctic, and obviously there's going to be midnight suns in darkness because the sun comes in and the sun comes out. You're in the middle.
Well, you need to be careful with those videos because I've seen videos that say, here's the midnight sun. Unfortunately, when it pans around, there are buildings. The north, there's no floating buildings at the North Pole. There's none. Yeah. Well, as the video pans around and they're trying to pan it off as a video from the North Pole saying it can't possibly come from the South Pole, they're actually showing video of the South Pole because there are buildings on the ice dome, not a dome over your head, but a dome of ice. It's several thousand feet down to the actual ground in some places. Some places not so much.
From the south, but there's always
Right.
like an 8-hour gap missing.
Oh.
360. And of course, there's always the American Britannica Encyclopedia.
Right. Yeah, 1958.
Only 11,000 feet.
No, it talks about the dome under their feet. It talks about an ice dome. I've seen the 1958 in Britannica article, and it's talking about an ice dome below them, not a dome over their head. The addition of the 11,000 feet isn't in the original article. The original article.
You know how the ice is in Antarctica? Some of those walls? Just wondering if you know.
Oh, of course. But that's only the Rhone, the Ross, and the Avery ice shelf, which is approximately about 8% of the circumference of, if you look at a picture, a demonstration of what the Ross ice shelf or the Avery ice shelf, or the Rhone ice shelf, they make up a small percentage, 10% at most, depending on the time of year and stuff. But there is not an ice wall 360 around Antarctica. They're cherry picking photos of the Ross ice shelf, the Rhone ice shelf, or the Avery ice shelf.
Those things where the helicopters are going along the ice.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't prove anything to me. What proves something to me is that if we were on a ball, and let's say the equinox, the Earth is tilting on its axis as it goes around the sun, you would have to admit that if this is truly a ball, then what's ever happening in the north is got to be mirrored oppositely in the south, correct?
Not necessarily, but
Not necessarily. So what are we on? A square?
No. In a ball, well, there is no land mass at the North Pole that is above the surface of the water.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that let's say, where it's the 6 months of darkness. There's the 6 months of light in the north. Okay, which I know is real. So let's say you're above Alaska. Let's say you're at the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing your thing. The sun doesn't go down for 6 months, right?
Right, because in Alaska,
Wouldn't you say that there's 6 months of light in the south?
if you get in a certain place, like at Point Barrow, Alaska.
The middle. Let's talk about the middle, the pole. Let's talk about even though we can't put our finger exactly on the pole, this is talk about the best we can do. There's a rod going through the earth.
Right.
You're at the top part of the rod, not the bottom.
Right.
Okay, so shouldn't what's happening to me be kind of like the opposite of what's happening to you?
As far as sunlight goes, and light and darkness, absolutely, sure.
Right, but it doesn't work that way.
It does. The reason, yes, it does, because people can observe it from Point Barrow, Alaska. They're within the Arctic Circle. They're within that area that they can observe it. Now, if you look at Antarctica, that same circle Antarctica sits completely inside of that, like South America. See, you're saying that maybe from Cape Town or Santa Cruz, Argentina.
I'm saying the technical
right.
pole.
Right.
There, the bottom.
I'll send you a link of that video I've seen, and it was posted by a flat Earth believer that said. Right. No, and I understand. I won't. But it does show that as they're tracking the sun, and so as the sun moves around, they're tracking it 360. There's no gaps. It shows like 4 or 5 revolutions, and you can see the buildings because it's in the South Pole.
So with all of this that we talk about, round Earth, flat Earth,
right.
the equinox, I see it as no midnight sun down there. You say there is the radiation belt, the radiation that nobody's going to live through if they go through it, according to what we've been told, but they go through it. They stand on the moon. The temperature on the moon goes from 150 below zero to 250 below above Fahrenheit. Not because the actual space is heated, because of the actual insulating factor of space. You say that gravity keeps our atmosphere in while the ball is spinning. I say that the moon is strong enough to affect the tides, but not strong enough to pull the lightest of elements out of the top of the atmosphere, which is a pressurized system next to a vacuum, which is impossible physically according to physics. And the one thing that really freaks me out is that the no, I'll be with you. Hold on. Sorry, there are kids running around here. Well, I think the best thing that you and I can do. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to ask you, which is I think you'll have a good answer because you're a smart kid. Why would you say that we never saw an actual picture of a satellite in space? And why does it? These satellites are really that far away. Or people go halfway between here and the moon. Why doesn't anybody zoom in and show us something upside down? I've never seen it. Why doesn't NASA put curvature in any of their documents? Why does the CIA have documents that are unclassified that show a non-rotating flat plane in every single document? I don't get it.
As an engineer, when you design something, you take out all variables and you start with a basic design. And that does take out wind. It takes out curvature. It takes out everything. That's the way things are designed.
What you're doing is you're saying that because we fly level over a level ground, that there's no need to take into consideration any kind of curvature, but yet we have 8 inches per mile squared. That's a lot when you're traveling in a plane at a couple hundred miles an hour.
It isn't really.
And you're at a certain, I see what you're saying. Like if you put a plane above a ball and you just spun the ball, that's what you're saying.
Oh, no. No, not at all. See,
The plane doesn't have to worry about. So most
Correct.
big planes travel at 3 degrees nose up. You know that.
Yeah, there's no such thing as level flight. And I'm glad you know that. There's no such thing as level flight. Right. There is no such thing as level flight, and the trim is adjusted to make the nose. You know, if you put a plane on autopilot, the yoke doesn't sit still. That mother moves all the time. So this is how it is. I appreciate. I don't care. Yeah. But there isn't a difference. It's misquoted. You will find flat Earth video makers saying, "Hey, you have to drop the nose this X amount."
What I believe is what I see, and I understand the kind of atmospheric illusion sometimes.
Right, but it is an illusion. Yeah, like I said in our PMs, that's why I don't like to discuss optical illusion, because it could be an illusion, it couldn't be. I mean, like I said, you could prove Chris Angel walks on water by a video.
No. Michelson Gale experiment in 1880 proved that the Earth is absolutely not moving. This guy was brilliant. And then he did another experiment in 1925, and he showed that the revolution of the ether, and he used an inframeter, which basically allowed him to see the ether moving over his head. So he found movement in 1925, but he didn't find any movement in 1880. And that actually proved, this guy proves flat Earth. Now, I understand what you're saying about the other things. There's absolutely legitimacy to everything you brought up. And it would make a uneducated flat earther think, hey, maybe I'm wrong. And what I know would make a globe earther think maybe they're wrong. So at one point, I think it would be really nice for us to get like a live thing going on. Because, maybe we get along. We're never going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
So one of the things we should do is get like a live feed going for the group where we could show diagrams and little video things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I want to show and I can't.
Right, because we're just talking. Yeah, because I can show where the problem, especially if some of the folks parrot, like you remember how you said, if they parrot, well, the nose has got to drop on the airplane so much. No, at 575 miles an hour, which normal flights are on, that's the max. They're really doing 480, something like that. Because they're conserving, but at 575 miles an hour, the nose on the airplane, in air quotes, needs to dip 6.4 feet a minute. That can be done with trim. It's simply, but people will say, oh no, it's 1,200 feet. They've got to really slam that over. No, they don't, because the Earth is real big.
So these pilots that are running like the ex-Concorde pilots that said there's absolutely no curvature, they just believe there's no curvature, or do they know?
Well, as a matter of fact, at the high speed, when the Concorde's flying along, the pilots couldn't see jack because they had to have the nose up because their windshields would melt. The only time they could actually see was when they came in for a landing. That's why the nose would go down to expose the windshield so they could see to land. When they were flying along, they couldn't see crap.
Well, they weren't talking so much about optical. They were talking more about navigation and
Well, yeah, at navigation, even at, SR, but on the other hand, there are SR-71 pilots that have pictures from the U-2s, and people will say, no, that's fisheye lens, but they don't understand that fisheye lens at the center doesn't distort. So if you can get that photo centered enough, then you can still see in the center. See, being into photography for 40 years, it's a concentric ring thing where the farther you get away from the center, the more the distortion occurs. Whether you're away above the center, the farther you get away, it is sort of logarithmic. The center of the actual image. The center of the image, it's logarithmic to where...
Well, the thing is that you might be correct that the center might not really be as distorted.
Yeah, the center line. The center...
The arc of the curve on a curvature lens is constant throughout the whole lens, but you're just picking a little spot in the middle. I could never really even have a curvature where fisheye lenses, or even winning lenses, any legitimacy when showing,
it's simple.
Up to 120,000 feet,
right.
They would completely be dismissed. But they use, like, this one student, he sends up a balloon, and the article says, a college student films the curvature of the Earth. No, he didn't. You've never seen the curve. No, and neither have I. Nobody made the curve. So the only explanation of all the things that people believe is that if we weren't on the ball, there's a lot of problems. Because, like, the Rosetta Stone, we traveled trillions and trillions and trillions of miles just in the last, thousand years? And yet, every star is in the same place. And then when you're in the South Pole, and you break out a compass, which way is north? But globe believers will tell you that the electromagnetic energy that travels around the Earth always points to the north. And yet, when you're on the south, opposite of the ball, you're technically facing out.
Mm-hmm.
How can a compass possibly work?
Oh, I can certainly explain that as well, because if you take a simple bar magnet, cover it with wax paper, a BAR magnet, a bar magnet, okay, sprinkle it with, cover it with wax paper, and then get the finest iron filings you can do and dribble on it, and magnetic lines aren't straight, they curve. So if you were to place a bar magnet dead center inside of a tennis ball, a beach ball, a medicine ball, something, and you were to get a bar magnet in the dead center of that, and then try to, or simulate that, get a picture of a bar magnet with iron filings sprinkled on it, and then superimpose a ball over that, you will find those magnetic lines curved. They don't cut through the surface. They go around the surface.
So you're saying if I take like a beach ball,
Mm-hmm.
and I put a very powerful magnet on the top.
Right. So north is at the top, south is...
It's on the other side, exactly. You're saying that magnetic energy is going to go around that ball to the compass?
Well, the reason a compass works is because one end is northerly charged. The other one is southerly. So what they do is they don't point to north. They align with those magnetic flux lines and point in that direction. So you can go anywhere along that ball, and the south end will still point to the south. See, when you get down to the South Pole, the north indicator on a compass isn't going to point towards the South Pole. It's going to point to the end.
Away from the South Pole, right?
It's going to point, well, the way a compass works is really the one that's opposites attract. So the one that's painted red that says N on it is really south. It is charged so that it will be attracted to the south or the north, depending on what's that bar magnet. So if you get compasses, yeah, magnetic north, and see, that's not really at the pole. It's like somewhere in Nova Scotia or something. Yeah, it is in the area. But if you sprinkle iron filings on a bar magnet covered in wax paper, you will see that those things gravitate to magnetic lines of force that arc. They don't run straight down the side of that magnet. They go out in an arc, and it's varying different degrees of bending around, so that if you can actually put like a tennis ball, you can take a picture of it and then edit the picture so you've got a circle, and you can see how these magnetic lines of force wrap around that curved surface. So that argument doesn't really... And there are no existing natural or artificial circular disk magnets that have a magnetic center that is north and a magnetic outer ring that is south. There are no monopoles in existence. Now, there are magnets that have a donut hole in them, and so they're theoretically like a whole bunch of bar magnets with the centers pointing towards. But you have to have a hole in the center. There are no disk magnets that have a solid center that have a magnetic north at the center and a magnetic south at the outer ring.
Yeah, you would have to take two magnets and connect them, and they have to be opposite. You probably have to glue them because they want to repel. That would be the only way to make that, right?
Well, there are manufactured. There were years ago when I tried to do an experiment, and they are expensive. But you can see a lot of the times when you buy a disc magnet, north is on one side, south is on the other, and the outer ring is, neutral, so to speak. But you know what I'm saying.
I get you.
But yeah. But if you try to get one where the center is a certain polarity and the outside is the opposite polarity, then those mothers are rare, and they are always a ring, and the inner hole is not small, because the repelling factor against all those northern ends of those magnets, it's like a pie. But if you made a pie a donut, you cut the pie into slices and you made it into a donut where the hole is out, then each one of those slices on one side can be north and the other one can be south, and they can be stuffed in there and made to work. But I'll tell you what, if you want to buy one of those suckers, that's a lot of money, because they are really rippingly hard to create. So for someone... Well, they're just a ring magnet. A ring magnet, but they have to have an opening in the center. And then the center can be north. Yeah, but the center can be north and the outside can be south. It is possible, but not if you make that hole in the center. Beyond there's a critical mass, so to speak, where you can't do it. And nobody's done it, and they don't exist in nature, and nobody's actually artificially created one in the laboratory yet. So to say the whole Earth is that, that's one of those. That's when you look and it's Occam's razor. Simple explanation is the best, or the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes thing. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever exists and is left with, however improbable, must be the truth. But
it's a big flaw in Occam's razor, and I'm sure you're
aware of that,
because it doesn't take into consideration anomalies.
Right, and he was a priest back in the day, back in.
He's always a priest that came up with the Big Bang thing.
1300, yeah. Well, and and the thing is, those magnets, it just doesn't, there's no way to make a flat pizza disc magnet that's north in the center.
Just because we're limited in our technology to make a magnet that might actually show us how flat Earth might work. Yeah, I get it. Like we were talking about before, technology is an amazing thing because we have all of this technology, yet, at least from what my research has shown me, I'm sure there's lots of technology that you and I are not privy to. I was privy to some of it when I was designing one atmosphere and ambient submersibles for SEAL Team delivery vehicles, and I worked with SEAL Team 3 for almost 2 years down in Texas. But that's different. When it comes to what we're talking about, we're probably never going to be privy to some of that stuff. And, well, technology, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, from what my research has shown me, and I'm a pretty smart guy, so are you, they can't even duplicate that stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, that's...
I'm not saying that somebody made, what we're living on. I mean, that would be scary. But there's so many things that we don't understand, and those are the things that really bother me. Like when I see a video of a balloon at 130, 50,000 feet, and the horizon is dead flat, when I see no NASA videos being honest about a curvature lens,
well,
I never see satellites in space.
You mentioned that, John. Yeah, why can't you see them? Well,
why can't I see what?
The satellites. You said, you can't see satellites.
I don't mean that I can't see them from where I'm standing.
Right, no, but what I mean is, when you look at the largest satellite we have besides the moon is ISIS, and you can see it pass in front of the moon. But that's the biggest one, and it's big out there. Most satellites are the size of a bathtub. Now, think of this. Let's say that you remember that video you showed me and stuff like that? The 250 mile one, okay? But imagine, could you see a bathtub that was twice that distance? I mean, we're talking, you were showing 250, okay?
I understand your reasoning, and you're right. I was talking about, I have like the live feed from ISIS. I have all of this incredible NASA videos where they actually have like a whole hour and a half nonstop of just like looking down at the Earth, looking at space. And you got the sun's right there, right? And these satellites, which I believe have shiny parts, I'm sure some of them have very shiny parts, not one little spot, not one little reflective. I watched the whole hour.
Well,
and I got so many people out there that have so many videos of legitimately very high altitude videos. And even if it's like curvature or not, it doesn't matter. You watch these videos and you never see one little reflective sparkle from the 23,000 fucking things circling our planet.
Right.
One little sparkle.
And
I mean, that's a little bit weird. You know what I mean?
And where do they circle from? They circle from Leo all the way out to geosynchronous. Geosynchronous.
These things are low Earth orbit.
Well, the Leos. How high does the how high does the high altitude balloon go? 120,000 feet.
I was talking about the ice speed. Hold on a second. Sonic? Oh, that's a really small tail. And you keep a whole bunch of the tail. Okay, I'll fix it. Don't worry. Alright, I'll be with you in a minute, okay, buddy? Alright. Hey, Marcus, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out a way, and I'm going to figure out how to get a live screen where you can show me videos, and I'm going to show you, once I learn, I'm going to show you what I learned so that you could just get like some videos ready. And what we could do is if I could see you through your camera, then we'll make it so that you can also allow everybody to see your screen.
Right.
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'm going to figure it out because I know David Weiss does it. He talks to people.
Yeah.
He got things up on this screen. So it goes from you seeing his face talking to what he wants to show you. And I want to be able to do that with you. And let the people in the group talk. Because believe me, we don't allow like idiots to insult or anything. And even though I know they might have
yeah. Oh, no, and really, it was not, I've had some hard times, trust me. So,
we're not like those
no, I understand that.
Don't do that.
But, right, the thing that I mean, people can disagree because I think some of the things you have pointed out are wrong, but I don't have, I may not have the acumen to point it out, but the thing that does it for me is, and you haven't used this, and I really have to praise you for it, because most of the time, I will get somebody that says, oh, have you personally done this? You know? And you and I know, I haven't personally piloted a submarine, but I know they exist. You know, I haven't personally, but I've had somebody, I've tried to explain to them about bouncing radio signals off the moon, and I always have the person come back and, oh, well, you've personally done that, you're only doing what you've been told. And I have to go, guess what? I have. And it was fun. It was exciting. I would recommend anybody that wants to get into something else, maybe, you know, now that sometimes the COVID danger is done. The ARRL has field days. They had one back in April. I don't know when the next one will be. I haven't really been looking. But they have field days where you can watch this, and you can see where the people that say, oh, you're just bouncing signals off the firmament. But at the frequency range, they have to have the moon in the crosshairs. And if they don't follow its movement with even an electronic tracker or manually tracking, the signal dies. And if it was something in front of or behind the moon, it wouldn't die. It wouldn't matter where they pointed it. But they have to point that antenna dead on in the moon, or else, and it's tricky. It's a pain in the butt. But that is something, and you just have to ask yourself, okay, even if everybody's lying to me about everything else, that's really weird that signal has to be on that moon. So it's a solid object because the frequency only bounces off solid objects. You have to start to connect the dots. And you go, okay, Earth, Moon, Earth, EME, Earth, Moon, Earth communication, which the very first one for amateurs happened back in the 1960 itself, was the first time just regular folks did it. There's, yeah. Everything else.
When they go by the moon and it looks flat. You ever see that?
Yeah, and you know,
kind of weird.
it's a 3D looking thing. And you know, when you said the moon gets high temperature, low temperature, and that, well, when the Apollo folks were on there, sunrise is 15 days away from sunset. It's not hours, it's days. So as they roamed around up in there, they were in the sun all the time. And people say, well, it would have gotten cold at night and frozen them to death. Night didn't come until about 11 days after they left, because they forget that one side faces the Earth all the time, and that's the side they were on in the seas, because the other side is so pockmarked you can hardly land on it.
That's a weird point that you just brought up. If the moon goes around the Earth every 25 hours,
25 days.
Possibly have phases
Right.
that take a whole month to go through.
But it doesn't. It takes a whole month to go around.
Right, well, I'm saying, think about that. Like if we're on the Earth, the sun's over there, and the moon's going around us.
Yes.
Technically, the moon, we should see, just like, let's say you're out in space and you're looking at the Earth for a 24-hour period.
Okay.
You would see light go, you would see the Earth spin once. Okay.
Right. And the moon.
In 25 hours, you should see the moon go around the Earth once.
Oh no, not at all. You see, from an outside observer, this is what you would see. You would see that the Earth makes one complete 360.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the moon moves 2 degrees. Not a 360 around the Earth. The Earth's doing the 360. The moon is just sitting there, looking at the Earth turn around under it, it is only moving 2 to 3 degrees. I'll have to do the calculations, but it's only a few degrees. It's not. See, that's the misunderstanding of spatial relationships that some folks have. Not saying you do. You're pointing out what they would point out.
I never really looked into that. I looked at so many other things. So I'm like, oh my god.
Well, if something covers 360 degrees in 29 days, because the way it runs around, even though it covers a certain gambit in a certain days, it takes. So if you do 29, you would take 360 divided by 29, and that's how many degrees the moon moves in that 24-hour period. And that's all.
Right, and according to the flat Earth theory, right, the sun kind of like chases the moon.
Right.
And of course, the funny thing is that I hear these people sometimes debating back and forth, but they don't take into consideration that each theory has to come out to the same thing.
Right.
Because we see the same thing.
Right. And that's a great point, because because when you point out the moon, say, watch the moon. I've done this a couple of times, and I'll tell you, it's on a weekend because I'm blurry-eyed by the time I'm done. But I actually did an experiment that I saw where I took some construction paper and a roll out of a paper towel, and I got it down to where it was wrapped around a McDonald's straw, or roughly that size inside diameter. McDonald's are a little big compared to everybody else's straws. And that tube was approximately a foot long. And I watched moonrise through that tube. Now, if the moon is flying along on a flat linear path over a flat plane surface, not only is the movement going to be logarithmic, it's going to be slower and cover a shorter distance the farther it is away from me, and then it's going to be larger and cover a greater distance the closer it is to me. I mean, we can see that example in airplanes, boats, trains, everything else. So, yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But the moon is I hate the idea that we have so many clouds now.
Right.
I want some clear weather so I can do these different experiments. I like the moon one. I want to do that.
Right, and it's fun.
I got my wife and grandson waiting. Here's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, man. You're great, man. We're going to have a good time. And don't worry about what anybody else says. People are just sometimes ignorant.
Yeah. And I got it wrong. It was only 12. It's 12 degrees that the moon moves in a day, I think it is, because it takes 29 days for it to go 360. So it's about 12. Yeah. Yeah.
Things come to those numbers always freak me out. Like 66.6 degrees of curvature here. Everything is 66. I gotta wonder about that, man. What are the odds? I'm gonna go attend to my family. And
sure.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look into the next couple of days how to do this. In the interim, just get some videos and some things ready.
Okay.
We don't ever, because the way we get along, we can only talk about what we're comfortable with. As long as you have the videos and stuff in front of you, you don't have to deal with nothing else. But it seems like you and me can talk about anything, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, yeah. But
nice meeting you,
nice meeting. If people would just slow down and relax, they could argue over anything, and then go out for a big breakfast at McDonald's together and sit down and eat. Who gives a crap? Yeah. But anyway, I will take care of that and do those 2 experiments with the moon. Look through a tube, and you'll see. Make it so the full moon fits exactly inside of that tube when you see the moon come up, and then look at it. Look at the moon at apex. It should, since it's physically closer to you on the flat Earth illustration, it shouldn't fit inside that tube anymore. And I think that'll be one to make you scratch your head.
I have a nice. The drones do it the best because even my regular cameras, because I have grids. So I can overlay a perfect grid, and that way the grid doesn't move. So whatever's in the frame, if it does change its angular dimension, you're going to see immediately by the grid. So I'm going to do that. We're going to have some fun. And we'll look at the outcome. You know, we're all seeking. We're all seeking.
Yeah.
Bro,
Yeah.
You know? But anyway,
And
very cool. Lovely meeting you.
no,
And I'll get back to you in the next couple of days with what I've learned about video with debating. Okay?
yeah, no problem.
All right, Bill. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you. Have a great
All
one.
right, Bill.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.
And there you have it. This man is not like Nathan Thompson, and he isn't like Mark Sargent. I think he would painfully inform his followers that the Earth is a globe once he realizes that it really is a globe and can accept it. Well, there we go. You know, it's been so long since I've made a video, I forgot how to edit, and I apologize. But, you know, he made mistakes, I made mistakes. But I didn't want to cut any of it because I would have members of his group saying I edited it, you know, and no. It's fairly obvious, blatantly obvious. I got him thinking about things he'd never thought about, which is good.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. Please like and subscribe. Have a good day. This has been Productions MJC.